Thank you. So just to reset the time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this introductory talk about domain-driven design. Now, this won't be a Laravel talk at all. I'm not a Laravel person. I never use Laravel. So if you're expecting a Laravel talk, you're free to walk out. I won't be mad. I just think that you have to go to the bathroom or something, so that's OK. And regardless of your experience, if you're a junior or a senior, if you've never heard about domain-driven design before, or if you use domain-driven design or are using domain-driven design, I hope that you will learn something from this talk. So hello, I'm Robert, and I've been a PHP programmer for a decade now, for 10 years. And during this time in this industry, I realized I really like working on legacy applications. And I like everything about legacy applications, from writing tests, writing documentation, upgrading PHP versions, upgrading framework versions, libraries, and so on. I also get nervous when I talk. I also contribute to open source a lot, because open source contributed a lot to my career, so I think it's fair to give a little back. So when people mention the term legacy applications, usually programmers' reaction is to run for cover, hide, start screaming, rewrite, rewrite. And I honestly don't understand why is that, because legacy applications are full of knowledge about the business that our software should support. And you cannot gain that knowledge by always starting from scratch, by throwing away what you have, what the previous programmers wrote, and then starting from scratch. You lose a lot of knowledge like that. So in my career, I never once came across a situation where rewriting an application from scratch was the right thing to do. So there's always good things about the legacy legacy applications. And I say that our software should support a business, because you don't write a piece of software and then make up a business around it. Or if you do, then you do startups. But like a real business needs support from our software to help them grow, to help them make more money. But OK, we are smart people. We are programmers. We are engineers. We are problem solvers. We know all the design patterns, the best practices. We attend conferences. We learn from each other. Then why do we still write shitty software? Like, why is everyone's, not mine, not yours, but everyone else's code is complete and utter crap? And during this decade in this industry, I was thinking about this a lot. Like, why do I came across shitty code over and over again? And what I realized is that the problem is communication, or better yet, the lack of communication, a broken communication. Communication between everyone involved in a software project, or everyone who should be involved in a software project, from business people, business stakeholders, to project managers, designers, programmers, everyone. Now, when I say communication, I don't mean just like me standing up here and talking, and you hopefully listening. Communication is a process. It's a complicated and complex process. When you just think about it, that I get an idea in my head. Now I have to find the right words and create coherent sentences in the language that we both use, using the words that we both understand. Then I have to be physically able to say those words out, or to sign them, or through other medium to convey you my idea. Then I have to hope because that's all I can do, is to hope that there is no obstacle between me and you hearing my sentence, then you actually being able to hear my words and making sense out of them, you know, to understand what I just said. And that's a really complex process. And communication is a two-way street. We don't have to be good only at talking. We even have to be better at listening, at hearing and understanding people. So when I started out in this industry, I was really happy. You know, I thought, okay, I'm going to be a programmer. I can sit at my computer all day, put on headphones, blast some loud music, hack away on code, and the money will magically appear in my bank account. I quickly realized, not so quickly, but I did learn that that is a really wrong attitude to have. Sure, you can put your headphones on to get into the zone, you know, and finish a feature or two. But in the end, you have to talk to people. And I realized that programming is all about communication. Not between me as a programmer and a computer as a machine, but between us, humans. Us who write the software and people who need that software and people who will use that software. So programming is communication. And to be good programmers, we need to be good at communication. Now, completely unrelated to this topic of communication, last year I had some free time, thanks to some projects not working out. They should have worked out. I decided I want to use productively that free time and not play games, but actually learn this thing called domain-driven design to see what's the fuss about. Because it seemed like a shiny new thing, you know, every conference has a talk or a workshop or, you know, about the subject of domain-driven design. And everywhere on Twitter, RSS feeds, everyone was writing about this thing called domain-driven design. So, what the heck, let's see what it's all about. And the first thing I learned, it's not a shiny new thing at all. The first book about domain-driven design was published in 2004 by Eric Evans, and it's the blue book titled The Domain-Driven Design, Tackling Complexity in the Heart of Software. Now, I find it funny because I started learning programming in 2005. So that book is older than my complete programming career. And when I started out learning domain-driven design, I started out with this one part of domain-driven design, which is called tactical domain-driven design, tactical DDD. And I started out with this part of domain-driven design because pretty much everyone was talking about tactical domain-driven design. So I thought, like, tactical DDD is just, you know, DDD. I started learning from people, you know, talking at conferences, watching recorded videos on YouTube, reading blog articles, and so on. And I would also start pet projects to try and implement these things I learned. I think I started like 6 or 7 pet projects just to be able to mess around with these things. Now, when I say tactical DDD, you probably heard about some of these building blocks, as the blue book calls it. These are the entities, the value objects, the repositories, the factories, the services, aggregates, aggregate roots, so on. So eventually I bought the blue book, the physical copy of it, and when I started reading, I was happy, because this book, which defines domain-driven design, starts out with these building blocks of domain-driven design. And sure enough, everyone who spoke at conferences or wrote blog posts said the same thing as the blue book. Of course, I had a couple of holes in my knowledge, so I filled them with reading with that book. But once I went past those few chapters at the beginning of tactical DDD, I had a really hard time understanding the words in that book. Like, I had no idea what was I reading. I just couldn't understand it. Sure, it was in English. English is not my native language. But, you know, I'm not that stupid. I should be able to make sense of these words. So eventually, I got to one specific chapter, and I read it once, I read it twice, 3, 4 times, 5 times, and I gave up on it. Not on DDD, I gave up on the book. I put it back on the shelf for 2 or maybe even 3 months. Now, what I learned about domain-driven design is that this tactical DDD thing, it's easy to learn. Not easy, but relatively easy to learn to this other side of domain-driven design, which is called strategic domain-driven design. And I also learned that tactical DDD, it really doesn't matter. Sure, there are the building blocks, there are the code that you will eventually write, but it doesn't matter. The point of domain-driven design is this strategic domain-driven design. So when I started out, you know, getting into that strategic part, I would come across problems I wanted to solve in these pet projects. So I figured, okay, this sounds like a familiar problem, and other people probably already solved it. So I decided I would ask people who I know that use domain-driven design in their everyday job, like, hey, did you solve this problem already? So yeah, I did. Cool. Like, can I copy-paste, you know, just to see our solution, then I'll be on my merry way? It's like, no, why not? Well, what's your business about? Well, it's not a business, it's a pet project. Okay, but how do you see that problem? Because, and it turns out that in strategic DDD, especially, a lot of answers to questions is, it depends. Because the world of business is complicated and complex. And no matter how simple you think a business is, it's not that simple. There are a lot of moving things, and fine, 2 companies might be working in the same industry, might be solving the same problem, but they come to solve that problem with their own specific, you know, life experience, what they experienced in their life so far. So they have a completely different view of the world. No 2 persons share the same view of the world. They see the same problem in 2 different ways. So they will solve it in 2 different ways. So just because one thing worked for one company, for one software, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for you. So that's why a lot of answers is, it depends. And also a big problem with learning DDD, I found, it was a big problem for me, that sure, there are books, articles, conference talks, workshops that teach us about domain-driven design. And then, at the best, what they can do is they can show us where they started, what was their starting point to write that software, maybe 1 or 2 in the middle as they progressed, and then not even the end solution, but the solution they have right now, their current solution. And the problem with that is that in between start, middle, and current, they had dozens, maybe hundreds of experiments of things they tried, the ways they failed, the ways they succeeded. Things they worked for them for a while, and then it stopped working for them, they came up with a different solution. So it's not humanly possible to write a book with all these dozens and hundreds of little steps in between these bigger steps they show you. So when you read a book, you say, oh, he went from here to there. Easy. No, it's not. And also, a lot of DDD persons say that, you know, domain-driven design is for complex domains. No. I honestly believe that just by learning domain-driven design, that you can be a better programmer. You don't have to apply the things that DDD teaches in your software. Maybe it's not the right fit. Maybe all you need is really just a CRUD application generated by some sleek console command, and you're done. But just by learning the things that domain-driven design teaches, you will be a better programmer. That's my honest belief. Now, I said DDD or domain-driven design probably 2 dozen, 3 dozen times so far. But what does domain-driven design mean? What is domain-driven design? Well, it's an approach to how we develop software. And I like to even consider it as a way, as a philosophy of writing software. It gives us means to build better software. Better software for our users, for our businesses, better software for us. And the word domain in domain-driven design, it doesn't have anything to do with like google.com or something like that. It's not that domain. It's the problem space that the business is trying to solve. It's what they are working on. And just because there's the word design in domain-driven design, it doesn't mean that you design your classes, your databases, and then run along CodeMonkey, make me an application. No. Design, in the case of domain-driven design, happens as long as the software lives. As long as you're working on the software, you're designing that software. Of course, domain-driven design is not a silver bullet. It will not make your problems all magically disappear. And it's not a framework, it's not a library that you can install in your project, it's not a thing that you can copy-paste from Stack Overflow. So when we decide that we want to do DDD, the first thing we need is access to domain experts. Now, these domain experts are regular people, just you and I, just like you and I, but they have knowledge about the business. Our business is software. We are software experts. We're not banking experts, we're not accounting experts, we're not shipping experts, we're not, hairdressers or car mechanics. Those are the domain experts. And together with these domain experts, we use them to gather knowledge from them, to ask them questions about their business, ask them about their problems and what they envision as solutions. And then together with them, we will create a solution that a computer can run and execute and solve those problems. And we have to accept the fact that we are one team working towards one goal. Like, it's not us versus them, like, the domain experts, the software experts. No. Our goal is to support that business, to let that business make money. I know it sounds awful, we're in here to make money, but that's the truth. We are here to make money. And everyone must accept this, from top brass, CEOs, CFOs, everyone down to the lowest code monkey. Everyone must be on board with this idea that the software people need to talk to the business people. Of course, not every programmer on the team, but there has to be a clear way for communication. And this collaboration with domain experts, this working together, lives as long as the software lives, as long as the software lives. Just like the design, because we design it together with the domain experts. Now, the specific domain experts we started out with, he might go on a sick leave, he might quit that business, but another domain expert must come in his place. Same as when a programmer goes on a vacation. The project doesn't stop, there's probably another programmer that can take over his work. And with these domain experts, we try to understand and identify their core domain, their core problem they're trying to solve. And this core domain is the reason why are we hired, both them and us. Why did this business decide to hire us to pay us money? And this core domain, this core problem, gives that company the competitive advantage over their, well, competitors. Take, for example, a car mechanic. What does a car mechanic do? He fixes cars, right? That's his core domain. That's his core problem. That's what he does. But that's not all he does. He also has to hire mechanics. He also has to order spare parts. He also has to, I don't know, pay taxes, pay out the mechanics. So there's a lot more to a business than you first see on the surface. Now, everything that is not a core domain to a business belongs to subdomains. And we are hired to write software, but for these subdomains, we should do everything we can to not write software. Like if you're working on a solution for a subdomain, do your best to not write a single line of code. A car mechanic needs an accountant. Why would you, they need their taxes done. Why would you write them an accounting software and teach them how to use it? No. Hey, Mr. Car Mechanic, take this stack of paper to your accountant and let them solve that problem for you. You don't need software for that. There are people who do that. Or, for example, you're creating an online store, and the management wants, graphs, daily sales, weekly sales, monthly sales, yearly sales, whatever. You want graphs? Sure. Export to CSV, load it up in Excel, draw your charts. You are hired to write an online store, to make possible for people to buy stuff online. Fast, secure, comfortable. Not to draw charts for a person in a tie. Now, when we come across problems in the real life, we try to create models out of them to help us solve those problems. Now, when I say model in the term of software that is done the DDD way, I don't mean a model that takes your data from the user interface to the database and back. That's a data model, or what's in Laravel, Eloquent? Yeah, so I'm not talking about Eloquent models or Doctrine models. These models are useful for their use cases. Take, for example, a car crash test dummy. What is it? It is a model of a human being. It has no flesh, muscles, bones, reflexes. It doesn't know how to read, to write, to brake, to drive a car. But it is a useful model for car manufacturers and car safety people to test out how secure is that specific car. They take a car crash test dummy, put it in a car, slam the car 60 kilometers per hour into a brick wall. And they take out the data from the sensors that are in the car crash test dummy. So, is that model of a human a complete human? Of course not. Putting in there a human would be expensive, painful, stupid probably. So a car crash test dummy is much more useful in this use case. And we have to do the same in software. We have to create useful models that help us solve those problems. And again, this modeling happens in iterations together with collaboration with the domain experts. It happens slowly over time. So once you write your first model, don't be afraid to throw it away. It's your first model. You're just taking baby steps into this domain. Feel free to throw it away. Sure, you put in the hours. Sure, you check that code into the Git repository. But if it's the wrong model, throw it away. Because the wrong model will never give you the correct solution. So these models, we use them to gather this knowledge from the domain experts. And these models can be documents, Word documents. They can be Jira tickets or emails, stuff like that. It just happens that we are software experts. We write code. So we express these models as code. And eventually, a computer or a set of computers will execute that code and, solve us the problem. Now, we have to talk to these domain experts. I hope we all agree on that. We established that. But when a domain expert says, we have an agent and a lead, an author and an editor, a client, a customer, why are we writing user classes? It's not a user. It's an author or an editor or a client or a lead or whatever. So use the same language as the domain experts, because that will help you a lot, especially when you come across legacy applications. 6 months down the line or 6 years down the line, when you see a class user, so it takes this flag and this value from the database, and then this override method, and yeah, it's an author. Or is it an admin? Because, but if you see a class author, you immediately know what it is. An author cannot be an editor. It's really simple. And this language that we use together with the domain experts, we call it the ubiquitous language. Now, this term ubiquitous, I had a really hard time understanding that word. So I had to look it up in the dictionary quite a few times. What it means is all-encompassing or ever-present, which again means that it is everywhere. So this ubiquitous language that we use together with our domain experts has to be everywhere. In the documents, in the emails, in the chats, in the face-to-face conversations, in our code. It has to be everywhere, the same language. So when a domain expert says, okay, we need to schedule a meeting, then name your method schedule a meeting. Sure, you think you worked on the same problem before, and there you use the method called make appointment, for example. But in this case, the domain expert sees it as scheduling a meeting. So name your method like that. But of course, you have previous experience. So talk to them like, hey, in this previous project I worked on, we call the same thing make appointment. Would that make more sense here as well? And then they say, yes, no, maybe, yes, let's go ahead with make appointment. So you change the language that you use together. So again, that language has to change everywhere. You need to update the tickets, the documents, the code comments, the code, and they also have to update their own vocabulary. So if you catch them, they say still schedule a meeting, remember, we're now making appointments. You have to bring it up to them. When I say this one word, just shout out, what's the image in your head? Kiwi. Fruit, okay. Bird? Bird, okay. I also had like a person from New Zealand. Their nicknames are Kiwis. My image is my friend's parrot. A different bird, but bird nonetheless. It was one simple word, but people had different images in their heads. And that's a problem. So without that context around that word, you had no idea what I was thinking about. So all human language needs context to be more easily understandable. And in domain-driven design, because we designed this ubiquitous language with our domain experts, we create boundaries around these languages so that we can say, okay, this word right here, it means this thing within this boundary. Outside, I don't care, but within this boundary, it means only this. So these bounded contexts were the problem or the chapter I gave up the blue book on. I just couldn't understand bounded contexts. It made no sense to me whatsoever. Of course, it didn't leave my mind, so during those 3 months, I didn't read the book. I was still thinking about it. And then I remembered a project I worked for some 4.5 years. And there we had a product with a price and a cost, and the price and the cost. And 2 different formulas how to calculate the specific prices on the specific costs. And during my 4 years there, I always had to ask the domain expert, like, which one do I use? How do I calculate this? And it turns out, I remembered that one price, one cost, one formula was used if a product appears on a purchase order, and a different price, different cost, different formula if it's on an order. Then I got the aha moment of, oh, so the purchase order and the order are my bounded contexts, because I have the term product, I have the term price, cost, calculate, price, but in different bounded contexts. When I got this aha moment, I, of course, immediately wrote it on my blog. And how I try to describe there is you have a book, a physical book. And if you ask a book publisher, how do you price this book? They will say, well, I need to take into consideration the paycheck for the author, the editors, the price of paper, printing, binding, marketing, designing, and whatever else there is for book publishers. But if you ask a bookseller, how do they see the price of the book? They will say, well, it's the money I pay to the book publisher to buy that book in the first place. Then I need to put in that my profit margin, the rent for the store, the paycheck for the store clerk, and so on. So again, the book publisher and the bookseller in these cases are bounded contexts. And these bounded contexts keeps those languages separate. So if I would ask a bookseller, how do you see the price of a book? And they say, well, in goes the price of paper. Like, oh, no. You don't care about the price of paper. The book publisher cares about the price of paper. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong with our model. And in the ideal world, there should be one bounded context with one ubiquitous language within one core domain or subdomain. And of course, the world is not ideal. Our software even less so. So there can be cases when, one bounded context with its ubiquitous language spans multiple subdomains or multiple core domains. But you can use that as a design smell. Did we misunderstood the problem? Why are we creating this bounded context, this language so big when it encompasses multiple things? Maybe we need to split it up. And again, just because once you wrote a solution, and this is important, so that's why I'm repeating myself. You wrote a solution once for one problem, but maybe the business decided we're going to pivot. We're going to work on a different problem or solve it in a different way. Your first solution is not a good solution anymore. It was a good solution up until that point. From that point, you need a different solution. So create a different one. Don't be afraid to throw it all away. Of course, you can probably reuse bits and pieces here and there, but most of it, because if you reuse existing solutions for different problems, guess what will happen? A shitty legacy application. Because that's what probably, in most cases I've come across, makes a legacy application really hard to work with, is that wrong solutions were used for the right problems. Okay, I'm running a little fast, but doesn't matter. Lunch is after this, so yay. What does domain-driven design and communication have in common? Well, domain-driven design puts a lot of effort and a lot of focus on the importance of communication. And it teaches us how to be better communicators by telling us we need this language. We need to design it. We need to talk to people. We need to talk to people who know things. And we need to set up boundaries around that language so that we don't mix. And just by following the principles of domain-driven design, I honestly believe that our communication will improve, and will improve a lot. And by that, our own programming skills will improve as well. I really believe in this, and this is my second time I'm giving this talk. The first time I gave it in Belgrade. I finished off that I believe in domain-driven design so much that I'm betting my career forward on domain-driven design. So I sort of kind of put my mouth, how's the saying goes? I don't know, doesn't matter. I accepted a job offer from a creation company who has a really big, really old legacy application, and they're trying to improve it with domain-driven design. So I had to turn down better offers for jobs. That was 2 months ago, just so I can really see, domain-driven design within a legacy application, like how it really goes. So, thank you very much, and be excellent to each other.